Hello everyone. Welcome back to Echo Stories. Today I have a story that will make you understand why some people simply cannot mind their own business. Imagine a woman so obsessed with power that she literally tries to destroy an abandoned animal sanctuary just because she couldn't accept that she had no authority over my property. But hold on, it gets better, or worse, depending on your point of view. When she discovered who I really was and what my property represented, the reaction was so epic that I still enjoy remembering it to this day. Stay until the end, because you won't believe what happened when she finally understood the mess she had gotten herself into. Contextualization and character introduction. My name is David. I'm 52 years old and a retired veterinarian. After 3 decades saving the lives of domestic animals, I decided to dedicate my remaining years to something even more meaningful. I bought a 15-acre property on the outskirts of town, well away from urban hustle and bustle, and transformed it into a licensed sanctuary for abandoned and mistreated dogs. It's not a business, folks. It's a life mission. I have all the necessary licenses, operating permits, veterinary certifications, trained staff, everything in compliance with federal and state law. The property is located in a rural area, but recently some luxury condominiums started being built nearby, and that's where our antagonist comes into the scene. Margaret Thompson, 48 years old, president of the Sunset Hills Condominium Association, which is located about 800 meters from my property. Margaret is exactly the type of person you're imagining. Always impeccable hair, luxury cars, expensive clothes, and a pathological need to control everything and everyone around her. The problem is that she genuinely believes her power as board president extends far beyond the boundaries of her own condominium. Initial conflict development. It all started on a Tuesday morning in September. I was at the kennel doing the first round of the day, checking on the 23 dogs that were under my care at that moment, when I saw a black car stopping in front of my gate. Margaret got out of the vehicle wearing high heels and formal attire completely inappropriate for stepping on rural property, but anyway, everyone with their choices. She marched to the gate with a folder in her hand and an expression that mixed arrogance with absolute disgust. Before even properly introducing herself, she began, "Are you the owner of this mess?" I politely replied yes, introduced myself, and asked how I could help her. "Help?" She laughed sarcastically. "You're going to help me by removing these animals from here immediately." The residents of Sunset Hills are complaining about the noise, the smell, and the devaluation of properties. Folks, I'll be honest with you. At that moment, I still tried to maintain politeness. I explained that my property was a licensed sanctuary, that all dogs were well cared for, and that I had the legal right to operate there. I even showed some of the certifications I always carry with. "I don't care about your little papers," she said. "As president of the Homeowners Association of this area, I am ordering you to remove these animals within 48 hours or face legal consequences." There, I realized I was dealing with someone completely disconnected from reality. "Mrs. Thompson," I replied calmly, "your association has no jurisdiction over my property. It is located outside the limits of your condominium, and my sanctuary operates within all legalities." Her response was surprising even to me. We'll see about that. Conflict escalation. In the following days, Margaret implemented a true terror campaign. First, she started spreading lies about my property on residents' social media. She said I kept animals in precarious conditions, that there were no adequate licenses, that it was a public health risk. All lies, obviously, but people tend to believe whoever speaks loudest. Then came the calls to public agencies. Health surveillance, police, fire department, environmental department. Margaret contacted everyone she could think of, always with false but elaborate complaints. Fortunately, I keep all documentation rigorously up to date, so each inspection only confirmed that my sanctuary operated exemplarily. But imagine the trouble of having a different inspection showing up here almost every day. The last straw came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the sanctuary office, which is in a separate building within the property, when I heard dogs barking in an altered way. I went out to check and found Margaret inside the property, trying to film the kennels with her cell phone. She had jumped the back fence and was literally invading private property. "What are you doing here, ma'am?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Collecting evidence of your illegal operation," she replied without even blinking. "These animals are being kept in inadequate conditions and I'm going to prove it." Folks, at that moment the dogs were clearly stressed with the presence of a stranger acting aggressively, and Margaret was interpreting this as a sign of mistreatment. I explained again that she was on private property without authorization and that she needed to leave immediately. Her response was to open the folder she always carried and hand me an official notification from the Homeowners Association demanding payment of a fine of $8,000 for keeping animals in excessive numbers, causing noise disturbance, and operating irregular commercial establishment in residential area. Climax and revelation. Now pay attention, folks, because here the story gets really interesting. I took that ridiculous notification and told Margaret, "Ma'am, you just committed 3 federal crimes in the last half hour. Property invasion, ideological falsehood by pretending to have authority over my land, and attempted extortion with this fantasy fine." She laughed with contempt. "You have no way to prove any of this, and even if you did, who do you think you are?" That's when I smiled and pulled out my cell phone. "Margaret, let me introduce you to someone." I called my lawyer, Dr. Roberto Silva, who coincidentally was arriving for our monthly meeting about the sanctuary's legal issues. But what Margaret didn't know is that Roberto isn't just any lawyer. He's the chief prosecutor of the state's Animal Crimes Prosecution Office and my partner in the sanctuary operation for 5 years. When Roberto appeared at the property entrance along with 2 other prosecutors and a bailiff, Margaret's expression changed completely. "David," said Roberto, "I got your text about the situation. I brought the complete sanctuary documentation and also a search and seizure warrant against anyone who is disturbing a licensed animal protection operation." Folks, I wish you could see Margaret's face at that moment. In a matter of seconds, she went from arrogant to completely lost. Roberto began explaining to her the seriousness of the situation. "Mrs. Thompson, Mr. David operates here one of the most respected sanctuaries in the state. We have official partnership with the Public Prosecutor's Office, receive federal and state funding, and our operation has already saved more than 300 animals in the last 5 years. You not only committed crimes against him, but against a public utility institution." Consequences and outcome. What happened in the following minutes was cinematic. Margaret tried to argue that she didn't know any of this, that she was just defending the interests of the condominium residents. Roberto had no patience. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, especially when there's a systematic campaign of persecution and defamation. We have screenshots of all the false social media posts, recordings of calls made to public agencies with untrue information, and now flagrant invasion of property. Margaret started stuttering, trying to explain herself, but Roberto continued. "Furthermore, this notification that you delivered constitutes attempted extortion through false document. A homeowners association cannot fine properties that are not under its jurisdiction, and pretending to have this authority is a federal crime." At this moment, folks, Margaret finally understood the dimension of the problem she had created. She started crying, yes, really crying, and begging us not to prosecute her. "I didn't know," she repeated. "I thought it was just an irregular kennel. I didn't know it was official." Roberto looked at me and said, "David, the decision is yours. We can proceed criminally or accept an agreement." I could have destroyed this woman's life, folks. I could have prosecuted her for all the crimes, demanded compensation for moral damages, and even placed a permanent restraining order. But do you know why I didn't do that? Because in the end, Margaret was just another lost person trying to have control over a world she didn't understand. Resolution and lessons learned. We decided to make an agreement. Margaret would have to publish on the same social networks where she spread lies a complete retraction, explaining that the sanctuary was a legal and respectable operation. She would also have to make a donation of $5,000 to the sanctuary, not as a fine, but as a way to repair the damage her actions caused to the animals that depend on our work. But the most interesting part of the agreement was community service. Margaret would have to spend 40 hours working at the sanctuary, learning about what we really do here and helping care for the animals. Do you think she refused? On the contrary, she accepted immediately, still crying and apologizing. And do you know what happened during these 40 hours? Margaret was completely transformed. In the first week, she arrived here scared to death of dogs, wearing gloves and keeping her distance. But gradually, she began to understand that each animal here has a story of abandonment and suffering, and that our work is not just to care for them, but to give them a second chance to be happy. At the end of community service, Margaret came to me with tears in her eyes. But this time, they were tears of gratitude. "David," she said, "I apologize not only for the crimes I committed, but for being so blind and arrogant. What you do here is too beautiful for me to have understood before." Epilogue and final reflection. Folks, today, 6 months later, Margaret is one of the sanctuary's biggest supporters. She uses her influence in the condominium to organize fundraising campaigns, adoption events, and animal welfare education programs. The residents of Sunset Hills, who used to complain about the noise of dogs, now line up to visit the sanctuary, and some have even adopted animals from here. Margaret also discovered her true passion. She's studying to become an official volunteer at animal sanctuaries and plans to open her own rescue operation in the future. Who would have thought that a woman who came here trying to find me illegally would become one of the most important people in my mission to save animal lives? The lesson of this story isn't just that people can change, folks. It's that sometimes our anger and our thirst for control blind us to beautiful things that are happening right in front of us. Margaret was so focused on exercising power that she couldn't see that she was trying to destroy something that saved lives every day. Today, we have 31 dogs in the sanctuary, a waiting list of families wanting to adopt, and partnerships with 3 other animal protection organizations. Margaret became our community relations coordinator, and, ironically, she's much better at this function than she ever was as Homeowners Association president. Call to action in closing. Folks, if this story touched you in any way, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. The stories I share here are real. They're about real people facing real situations, and each subscription helps us reach more people who can benefit from these life lessons. In the comments, tell me, have you ever been through a situation where someone tried to use an authority they didn't have? How did you react? And more importantly, do you believe that people like Margaret can really change? Or do you think it was just my luck? Remember, folks, sometimes the people who attack us most are those who most need to understand what we're really doing. I'm not saying for you to be passive in the face of injustices, but sometimes an educational approach can transform an enemy into the greatest ally you could have. Thank you for watching another Echo Stories video, where every story leaves a mark that echoes through time. See you in the next video, and remember, every voice deserves to be heard, but not every action deserves to be repeated.